I have so many bases, it's unbelievable. If bases were currency in our hobby, I would be rolling in it. Yeah, baby, make it rain! I'm going to regret picking those up later. Anyway, in this video I'm going to show you how I base my armies. Let's face it, roads are everywhere. They're pretty integral to any country's infrastructure, so why do we see so few of them in Warhammer 40k or other systems? I don't know why, but it's really easy to do. First, get yourself a roll of cork, preferably something quite thin. There's no point in spending more than you have to. I picked this one up on Amazon, as you can see here, for 11 quid. Put this cork down and roughly cut it to size. All you need to do is lay your base face down and then cut around the edges. Now, what would a road be without potholes? This is possibly one of my favourite photos that shows how long some places take to get potholes filled. Anyway, to create these kind of cracks on your model, simply bend the cork. Try not to bend it fully because you don't want to split all the way through unless you need something really deep. Once you've got these in place, it's time to glue that down, and PVA works great. PVA might not seem strong, but after it's solidified, it actually creates this really thick layer. I'm going to use some clothes pegs to just make sure that the warping caused by the cork being rolled up doesn't affect my models, and this works most of the time. Once you've given it sufficient time to dry, all we're going to do is take it outside and give it a lovely dusting of black, making sure that we get in all the cracks. We don't want any of the cork to show. Then the lightest dusting of white. I'm actually moving my spray can from left to right really quickly to just scatter particles across it. This is actually the second time that I'm recording this, as I lost the first footage. As you can see here with this second base, I took more time in the initial run to make sure that I had an even spread of the colour, maybe pulling it in the top left or bottom right. Whereas in this one, I've kind of just scattered it across the whole base, which doesn't create those pools of light. Next up are those all-important lines. Now, to create these lines in the road, I'm going to take a piece of paper and cut a slit in it. Now, these can be done either side by side if you want a consistent amount of spacing, or you can do it with just one. Alternatively, if you wanted to get brave with it, you could instead use some kind of sellotape or double-sided sticky tape or masking tape to create the same effect. Now take a great big brush with plenty of bristles, wipe off most of the paint and basically stipple it on. What do I mean by stippling? I mean stab that base several times until you have clusters of paint. Don't worry if it seems too bright at the moment. If you're using something like a cream or an off-white, this will dull down, and if you make a mistake, you can always come in and use a black wash to dull that back down. Why not try messing around with this technique? Add split lines sometimes, add continuous lines. In the UK we have giveaway and overtake lines, which basically means that one side is allowed to overtake on the road while the other side is not. Adding this variety really sells your models. However, do consider whether you're going for intercity or inner city. If I'm going for intercity, it doesn't really make sense to have yellow lines. I've never seen double yellow lines on a motorway, for example, or red lines outside of a major city. So consider what you're doing. Also consider where your placement's going to be. If you're looking at some double yellow lines or red lines or zigzag lines that are commonly found right next to the curb, they would look a little bit strange in the middle of the base. If you really want to get fancy, you could do the lines as if your models are all following one another, making it look like a continuous road. Although then I would wonder why they're quite so strung out. If you really want to take this to the next level, a couple of things that you could consider. Streaking grime is great for adding puddles of oil. If you want to darken down random patches, you could use a wash, or you could even use pigment powders to just darken it down and scrudge around a little bit. If you wanted to create tyre tracks, you could take a ruler and draw 3 straight lines next to each other for each tyre, or do them in a squiggly location. I instead opted for trying to cheat this and used a tyre. Now, if you are planning on using a tyre, I recommend that you use one of the rubber Lego ones rather than using a plastic orc one like I've used here. If you're going to do this, attach it to something that can rotate to make this look more natural. Then make sure that you spread the paint out on the wheel. Don't let it cluster only on the peaks, or what you'll end up with is a great big smudge. If this happens, simply take a brush and move that paint around on the base until it dissipates enough to not really be noticeable. Then carefully reapply the paints into the crests and the troughs of the wheel so you get a nice even roll. Finally, if you wanted to take this even further, you could consider adding things like tufts, maybe rubbish scattered on the road, potholes, etc. And here we have it. Definitely my favourite is the tarmac. It's so easy to get all of this done. 20 minutes includes the drying time. The only work that you're actually doing is cutting the shape out and drawing on those white lines. You can see here the technique that I've used, where I've had streaking grime, I've had powders, and I've added things into the cracks and crevices. If you've enjoyed this video, do give it a like and a subscribe, and if you fancy seeing me turn this artwork into a 3D portrait that I can hang on my wall, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out next week. Otherwise, remember to battle the backlog.